So I'll go way back to the beginning. I was born in Toronto, Canada, to two amazing, lovely, caring, and compassionate parents who immigrated to Canada from India. And so I'm the firstborn and the oldest grandson on my mom's side of the family. So a lot of pressure riding on my shoulders to kind of set a great example for my over a dozen cousins that I have as well. So I'm the firstborn, oldest of two boys. My younger brother is 3 years younger than me. And, we had this lovely upbringing. We didn't have, we weren't raised with a silver spoon in our mouth, but we were raised with heart. And I think that's something that's really important and has helped both me and my brother help many other people in our industries. He's an optometrist. I'm a functional medicine practitioner. And so we've collectively helped, thousands of people with the work that we do. So it's been such a blessing to come up in such a wonderful home. Everything wasn't perfect. So, we did have to deal with a few challenges in our lives. One of them being that when I was first born, my parents were working and didn't necessarily have the means to be able to afford a babysitter. And so I went back, my mom took me to India, and I was raised for the first few months by my grandparents, which was a lovely experience from what I can remember, and certainly embedded wonderful experiences and memories for them. And they will constantly remind me, they've passed on since then, but they will always remind me of the joy that I brought into their lives. So it was wonderful to know that we've brought other people that we love and care for dearly so much love and joy in their lives, and so many memories for them as well. After that, when I was in India, the significance of the stories, I almost died. And so I was literally on life support. I got some sort of bacterial infection, and they just couldn't get the fever down. And eventually, through an IV antibiotic, I was able to turn the corner and survive the situation. But, kind of scary when your mom's halfway around the world and your grandparents are in control of you and managing, and they're their caretaker. I can only imagine how scary and traumatizing that experience was for them. And really no phones or internet or email to communicate back and forth. It must have been quite the challenge for them. So the reason I share this is because I almost died at a very young age. And, I feel like I've been given this second, perhaps even third chance at life with all the things that I've been through to really make an impact and to make a difference and to help people. What's also fascinating is that I was saved by modern medicine, right? The powerful and wonderful benefits of antibiotics saved my life. So I'm forever indebted to that system in some way, shape, and form. However, I'm here to really change it and make a difference in healthcare. That's really what I try to do right now, is impact people in a positive way. So growing up, with a middle-class family, really hardworking parents, salt of the earth people, really valued truth and honesty and integrity, and really putting your best foot forward in everything that you do. My first business was a barber shop. So I actually ran a barber shop in my parents' garage. And that was my first enterprise that I engaged in, and was quite successful. People drove around from all over town to get haircuts from me, particularly my friends, because once they caught wind, I was their go-to person. And the reason I share that is because I remember my mom coming home one day with me cutting hair in the garage. There's a bunch of people lined up waiting for haircuts. There's loud music playing. There's basketballs bouncing all over the place. And so it was like a party in my front yard. And my mom saw me having so much fun that she was afraid, if you will, that I was going to become a barber when I grew up, because it's kind of pretty low on the totem pole, if you will, in our culture to be a barber. And, the next day my dad woke me up and said, your mom cried herself to sleep last night. And I said, why? And she's like, she thinks you're going to be a barber. And I said, well, this is a passion. It's a hobby. It's fun. And it stemmed from me not liking the haircuts that I would get when I went to the barber and, cleaning them up when I came home. And, my dad said something to me that changed my life. And he said, at least I never have to worry about you going hungry. The significance of that story is that it's always kind of positioned me in such a way in my own head that no matter what I do, no matter how badly I screw up, I can always go back to being a barber. And I love doing it. So that's my absolute worst case scenario. If all else fails in enterprise and in business and I lose everything, that I will have a stable, steady income by cutting people's hair, helping them feel like $1 million afterwards. And I'm like, that's not that bad. So it gave me permission to take risks. It gave me permission to take chances on myself. And so I did. I went to, school, became a kinesiologist, then went to chiropractic school, loved what I was doing, but then discovered functional medicine at that point and took a risk. I said, hey, I could stay here and stay comfortable, or I can start my own practice, which is what I then did. And then started another one after moving from Cincinnati, Ohio, back to Toronto. So risk has been part of my MO. Calculated risk, if you will, has been part of my MO. And I think a lot of that stems from my childhood. And, I really feel like I have a sense of deep purpose for what I do because my life has been, elusive a couple times in my life. I've almost not come out the other side of things. So grateful for that opportunity, grateful for that ability, and now grateful to serve others.
Wow. Well, I just learned a whole bunch about you that I didn't know, because I certainly didn't know you ran a barber shop, and I wouldn't have guessed, we're both
the irony, right?
Yeah, but I can tell by your beard, it's very, very nice. So I was wondering, was that you who did that? So it sounds like it's been you with the upkeep, and
it's been me. Proudly haven't paid for a haircut in over, what am I, 45 now? So about 30 years.
Very nice. Very nice. That's a big savings for sure. One of the things that I know about you is, your service to holistic, heart-centered practitioners. And one of the things, that you say, I believe it's in your book, is serving them to, in a way that they're transforming the world, these holistic, heart-centered practitioners. And you mentioned functional medicine. So I was wondering if you just give our listeners an idea of like, what does that mean? And what exactly is functional medicine?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll give you my definition because it might vary from practitioner to practitioner, but really what functional medicine is a personalized root cause approach to helping people heal that is really proactive. So it's proactive and it's also participatory, where the client is engaged in their healing. So unlike kind of our conventional system, which again is necessary, and I'm glad we have it, it doesn't really get to the root cause of what's causing the symptom. And it doesn't really empower the patient to be part of the solution. Instead, it's like, hey, let's take this pill and lower your blood pressure, or let's take this pill and lower your cholesterol. So it's a very unempowering system. Whereas functional medicine, as a contrast, is quite empowering because we help people understand how amazing their bodies are. We help them understand the root cause mechanisms that are creating the issue and challenge for them that may be, very seemingly unrelated to the actual symptom that they have. And we also provide them with holistic and natural solutions that oftentimes will involve lifestyle, nutrition, exercise, mindset, breathing, really going back to first principles and getting into the basic necessities of what it means to be healthy and human. And what we find is when we do that the majority of chronic health issues resolve. We have this human body, we have to, treat it like a human body. It has certain nourishment that's required. It has certain energy fields that are required. It has a certain amount of sunlight that's required, hydration that's required. And if we learn how to take care of it, it serves us really well for an entire lifetime. And functional medicine does that. It's educational, it's informative, it's provocative because it gets people thinking, and it's really empowering, which I love about it. And, the client is engaged in the healing journey, which means that they're learning a set of transferable skills that they can pass on to their family members and children as well.
Yeah, I love that. And, I know that one of the things I read about you, and it was in your book, The Perfect Practice, where you mentioned that the patient of the future is the doctor. I'm sorry, the doctor of the future is the patient. And I really love that idea because, it really is in our hands. Health is in our hands, and we don't always have the greatest guides or mentors outside guiding us a lot of times to that in the world and society. So I think that, having that viewpoint that, you are your own doctor in many ways, and you have to take ownership of that. And do you have any more you can add to that? And also, I'd also like to think about with the communities of addiction recovery and addiction, and what ways do you think that functional medicine or holistic health could be helpful to that community in particular with when you think about addiction?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's tackle this one at a time. So the first thing I will add is that, yes, we believe that the doctor of the future is the patient, and it's really the only solution that I can think of for our healthcare crisis. Right now, if we use functional medicine as a reactive approach to wellness, then, people develop a chronic health condition. They may go to several different practitioners and experts and, specialists for them, for their particular condition. And then they end up in our office, right? So the average person is perhaps seeing 8 to 12 other practitioners before they land in a typical functional medicine practice. And at that point, it's a lot of it is going to be, very difficult and not always difficult, but it's going to be definitely challenging work, right? To get this person well again and get them 100% optimal if that's possible for that person. However, if this person was trained from the very beginning about how their body works, how to nourish it, how to breathe correctly, how much sunlight they need each day, if they were given the guidelines of how to take really good care of themselves, then they're not developing these chronic illnesses and diseases out of left field, right? It's an informed decision that they're making each and every single day with their health. So when I think of functional medicine, and the vision that I would love to see is not people getting a chronic disease and then finding us and coming to our practice, right? I'd love for people to be healthy their entire life, because that is actually something worth fighting for, right? Nobody wants their child to develop a chronic health condition and then find the most natural solution, right? They would rather not have their child be sick in the first place. Nobody wants a natural solution for cancer. People don't want cancer, right? So how do we create that world? And that world starts by empowering people. Think of a simple analogy I can offer, Jesse, is think of driving school, right? Now imagine that you just hand somebody a license the moment they turn 16 without any training, any preparation, any awareness of what the rules of the road mean. And now you just give them this 4,000-pound car that they can drive around town without knowing any of the rules. We would have a disastrous state of affairs when it comes to our roads, which is the same disastrous state of affairs our healthcare system is in. We're trying to save people who should know how to take care of themselves, who have developed chronic illnesses and diseases because of misinformation, disinformation, or just simply a lack of awareness. I've seen with my own eyes and witnessed, I'm sure you have as well, the medical system literally lying to us. Harvard scientists telling us that sugar isn't bad for us. Harvard scientists telling us that the root cause of heart disease is cholesterol, when that has been debunked for decades. In fact, even when scientists brought to the medical system what the root cause of heart disease was, they had already created their narrative and were not accepting any more theories. So there's a lot of misinformation that's out there as well. We are meant to, from the very beginning, and I believe intentionally, think that our bodies are broken and that they're incapable and that we have these defects that only modern medicine can fix. Whereas I believe that we're built in the image of perfection. And if even a single cell from your body was found in outer space, it would be the greatest discovery of mankind. And you have several trillion of those cells that are impregnated with the wisdom of the entire universe, that are coordinating, self-coordinating without any instruction from you, 1 septillion processes at the exact same time. I mean, who am I to tell someone that their body's broken when it's this magnificent concentration of the cosmos that's happening in front of me? I mean, we are the highest form of intelligence that we are aware of. And sometimes I question that. But as far as we know, we are the highest form of intelligence on the entire planet. I think the trees are, because they've learned how to live in harmony with the planet. So to me, they're the most evolved species. They don't walk around and do things like we do. However, for now, we'll just assume it's humans. We are brilliant. We are amazing. We are so much more capable than we've been given permission to be. And, I'm trying to change that narrative. I'm trying to help remind people how amazing they are, right? By simply sharing facts. Like, how cool is it that, there isn't a cell in your body that's more than 7 years old, and that, the majority of your liver will replace itself in the next 6 months, and that every 120 days you get a free oil change. All your red blood cells replace themselves. So you're basically dying and being reborn in every given moment. But if we keep telling you the same story and you keep believing the same story, that you're broken Well, guess what? You keep writing the same story. So I'm trying to help people write a new story based on evidence, based on what they get to witness on a daily basis in their bodies. And when we go back to first principles, your body wants to be healthy. It doesn't want to be sick, right? It actually takes more metabolic energy to be unwell than it does to be healthy, right? So our body is coded for efficiency. Illness is a very inefficient metabolic process that the body goes through. So it's always striving for balance and homeostasis and efficiency. Now, if we keep putting the wrong inputs in, then it's always having to course correct. However, if we work with the body, then we maximize efficiency, and health is like rolling a boulder down a hill instead of how it is for some people, seemingly rolling a boulder up a hill. Now, when it comes to things like depression and anxiety and addiction and mental health disorders, Joe Polish says this, and I'm sure this is in your belief system as well, is that the opposite of addiction is connection. And many times we view addiction as a disease, right, as a biological disease, but there may be an emotional component that's tied into addiction as well. And so as a functional medicine, practitioner, we look at it through multiple different lenses. Yes, there could be a chemistry challenge, right? If somebody's eating the wrong foods, then there's going to be obviously imbalances in their chemistry. If they're on a very inflammatory diet, that's going to change their brain chemistry. If they're in fight or flight because of inflammatory foods that they're eating, or they have other underlying inflammatory processes going on, then we know that depression and anxiety are heavily connected to an inflammatory process in the body. These biochemical pathways have been established for a very long period of time. The other thing that we know is that environment plays a role in how we feel. So if somebody is not getting adequate amounts of, let's say, sunlight, then they're not even making enough dopamine to properly function through the day. So they then look for dopamine elevating activities. So for example, cocaine elevates dopamine, pornography elevates dopamine, cold plunges elevate dopamine. Actually, one of the best things you can do is take cold plunges or cold showers if you want to raise your dopamine. Morning sunlight raises dopamine. A good night's sleep will help with dopamine. Adequate protein intake and proper digestion of protein into amino acids will help our body make dopamine. So it's one thing to have the chemistry through nutrition. It's another thing to have the signal, right? So we have to have the environmental signal for us to raise dopamine as well. And then the other thing that is really important, just to be human, humans are social creatures. And if we see what's happened over the last 3 years, there's no wonder we have a mental health crisis, right? People are probably eating the same foods, but they're spending more time indoors. They're not connecting as frequently or as deeply as they used to with individuals. I mean, there may have been a 2-year gap for some people to even see their parents. I know people who didn't even see their parents for 2 years, and their parents passed away alone in their homes without seeing their children. So connection is super important. And a lot of times Joe will say something to the effect of, people are looking for God in a bottle, right? So their addiction is to help treat some sort of pain. And sometimes that pain can be in the present tense. Oftentimes it's in the past tense. So that's where, if somebody's had a traumatic life experience, if they were sexually abused, if they had, tremendous loss in their life at a young age, sometimes it could be pre-verbal. They may not even be able to put words to it, but that trauma is impregnated into their fascial tissue, which is basically this spandex suit that we wear, which stores, traumatic information and positive information as well, but certainly traumatic information is stored in our tissues. And so, you want to look at somebody through multiple different lenses. And that's what functional medicine would do, for any condition, right? Any label that we give someone, we would look at it through the lens of, is this person nourished? Do they have the right chemistry in their body to function the way they want to? Do they have the right environmental signals to function the way they want to? And do they have the right social networks to function the way they want to? And are they utilizing their body in a way that it's meant to be used? And are they giving their body what it needs? If a plant is wilting, as an example, Jesse, I don't start questioning the plant. I don't start questioning its DNA. I don't start questioning, a lot of things. What I go to is, what does this plant need, or what is it toxic with, right? My wife and I have this running joke. she loves succulents, but she hasn't figured out how to not kill them. They always somehow end up on, on death row. We have a little death row for succulents in our house. And so she's working on mastering that. She always tends to overwater them. So sometimes a good thing, too much of a good thing, can be a bad thing. So it's crucial for us to understand what we need and what we need more of, what we need less of, and realize that our body's never fighting us. It's never fighting health. It's always looking for balance and homeostasis.
Yeah, I love that. And oftentimes addiction is said to be a solution to a problem, and instead of a problem. So I think that it can be a problem, but I think a lot of times it's really filling a need. It's filling, Gabor Mate talks about heroin being a warm hug for the heroin addict. And I have personal experience with that. So I think that, to look at it in that way, that, that addiction is serving a great purpose in many ways in that person's life, to be able to numb out maybe emotional pain or physical pain or spiritual pain. And I think that, looking at it from the lens of holistic health and ways that we're not brought up in learning, of course, and to be able to change the way we look at it right from the beginning, not at the end when we have to take these measures afterwards that are oftentimes really extreme and really expensive. And I think, so I think where I want to go next is I'm curious for yourself when I mention things like numbing out. Has there ever been anything in your own world where you found yourself numbing out? Maybe it was in the past or maybe it was recently. Is there any things you like to numb out with?
Yeah, so I was never big on drinking. I did enjoy going out and partying and having fun when I was in university, but those days are long behind me and haven't been much of a drinker. One of the things that I did turn to, being totally transparent, would be cannabis, because cannabis would allow me to get really creative and get really into my head and have amazing conversations with myself. But what I realized I would be doing is I would be ignoring everything that was happening around me. I'd be ignoring the conversations that are happening around me, or, my wife might be calling me and I would ignore her because I was having this amazing conversation with myself. And I didn't see a problem with that because I was enjoying those conversations. I was enjoying the creativity that it was spawning for me. However, I realized it was something that was impacting those around me. And so that would be one of the things that I use, if anything, to numb myself. Now I found different ways to kind of escape and have that conversation with myself, and that's using breath work. I also have other meditative practices like gardening. I love landscaping, and I love doing things around the house. So those are things for me that give me kind of an immediate benefit because I can see the end result. So this past weekend, as an example, I washed and waxed all my cars, and that was very meditative for me. It allowed me to be in my head, having a conversation with myself, doing a little bit of breathing, and having that dialogue. And I'm doing something productive with my time. I'm not just sitting on the couch, doing nothing and vegging out. I'm actually doing something productive. And for me, that raises my dopamine because I can see the end result. I can see when that dirty car is now clean and waxed and shiny, and I can, park it in the garage and periodically throughout the day, go back in there and make sure it's just as shiny as when I left it. So for me, I found other outlets to kind of zone out, to get into my head, and to have alone time with myself, because I found that that's what cannabis was doing for me. It would allow me to drown out the outside noise and have a conversation with myself.
Yeah, I love that. I love that a lot, because that's meditation too. A lot of people don't realize that is meditation. Cleaning your cars or doing the dishes or going for a walk, that can be a meditation as well. And you got me thinking about your breath work. So I've experienced a session with you more than once for your breath work. And what I found is that I had accessed really deep parts of myself during the experience. And so, for instance, I think in the last one we were, that you led through the exchange community, I found myself getting to trauma I'd almost buried through some of this breathing and the time I was taking with myself. And so I'd love to hear why does this breath work that you teach, how does it allow us to access these deep emotions stored in the mind and in the body?
Yeah, so my belief is, and we haven't done research to validate this. So one way to validate this would be through a functional MRI. And I've asked my guide, his name is Giovanni Bartolomeo, who developed this technique. I've told him, I said, hey, we should get some functional MRIs to see what's actually happening inside people's brains to be able to see this. Now, what my postulation is that the breathwork does something very similar to what, and it affects a part of our brain, our network in our brain called the default mode network, just like psilocybin does and other plant medicines can do. So the default mode network is essentially regions in the brain that are active when we're not focused on the outside world. So breathwork allows us to kind of go inwards, right? We wear an eye mask when we do it. We're really focused and concentrated on our breath and the music and my voice as we go through the journey. And so we're shutting off the outside world and really focusing on what's going on the inside. And so we're accessing different parts of our brain when we do that. And that has to do with the default mode network.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned about, psilocybin and some of these psychedelics. And I think, obviously there's a huge renaissance happening right now in the world of psychedelics, and especially in the world of addiction and mental health. I was just reading right before I get on this podcast with you about psilocybin and the treatment for alcoholism and the effectiveness of that. And so I'm wondering, when you think of like these ways of holistic health and healing, I'm wondering how those psychedelic medicines may help, but also how even just not taking breathwork for granted and how we can also access those states and help to, quiet the default mode network when we're in those states. So any comments on either of those?
Yeah, absolutely. So, my original introduction into the psychedelic world was using psilocybin mushrooms, specifically golden teacher mushrooms. And I discovered breathwork actually after that. So I had a frame of reference to compare one to the other. And I'll say one way to put this that really lands for people is I want you to think of taking a plant medicine like psilocybin or LSD. I want you to think of that like taking the elevator to the top of a mountain. And I want you to think of breath work like taking the stairs to the top of the mountain. So you can get to very similar places, right? If not the exact same place. However, the effort that's required is a little bit different. And so with anything, we treat the breath work like a ceremony. We treat it very similar to a plant medicine ceremony. We have a very well curated soundtrack of music. We have a very intentional space that we set up. We sage the room, we sage the individuals, we listen to the intention that they're setting into the journey. So very similar to how you would start many plant medicine journeys. And then instead of delivering the medicine, we breathe the medicine in, which is the air all around us, at different paces and different cadences, all set to guidance and instruction. And, about 60 minutes later, we're in an altered state where we've kind of shut down that network. And now we can really focus on what's happening from an inward perspective. And what's really cool is that when you're in that state, you can travel through time. So you can go to different parts of your life and relive those moments and reestablish the right story that serves you today. Many of the events that have happened to us, while they may be traumatic, a lot of times it's a story that we attach to the experience where the real trauma is. Right? We can look back as an adult and identify how something has served us, something that may have been traumatic at the time, how it serves us today. I'll give you an example if this is helpful. So my father, because this came up in a breathwork I just did the other day, and I haven't shared this with anyone, so I'll share it here with you. And so when I was young, and still to this day, my father doesn't know how to tie a tie, okay? Because he worked a blue collar job, right? He didn't have to wear a tie, so he never learned how to tie one. So anytime there'd be a wedding or any occasion to wear a tie, and if he just bought a new tie, I didn't know how to tie a tie because I was a young kid at the time. I had no reason to wear one either. And so he would send me over to his friend's house, which was like just five houses away. It was one of his best friends, and he knew how to tie a tie. So I'd go over there, I'd take my little tricycle, I'd go over there, and I'd go and get the tie tied. And then I brought it back. And one day I'm like, how hard could this be? Because it took him 30 seconds to do it. And on the way home, as I'm coming back home, I'm trying to untangle this tie and retie it. And I got back home and we must have been running late or something. And my dad saw the tie untied and he's like, oh, shit, like, I don't know how to tie this. Like, what are we going to do now? So, I obviously have to go back and get it tied again. But in his frustration with not knowing how to tie a tie, he hit me, right? So he slapped me. And, it still rings true to this day because, the question that I ask people is, when did you stop smiling? When did you stop dancing? When did you stop playing? And for me, it was that day. So I remember coming home and just being really, him being really upset with me having to like wipe my tears and go back to my dad's friend's house, get this tie tied again. But from that day, I was determined that I would learn how to tie a tie. And I never asked anyone how to tie a tie in my life because I never wanted to be in that position where I would be frustrated enough to do something like that to my child. Now, in my breath work, up until now, I just kind of lived with it. But in my breath work, I realized I had the revelation is that his frustration wasn't with me. His frustration was with himself. And he had no way of dealing with that or expressing that frustration. So he let it out on me. And I just happened to be there, right? So being on the receiving end of it. However, I know that, if you met my dad today, you wouldn't even be able to imagine something like this happening. He's the kindest, gentlest soul, but he just didn't have an outlet, right? We have outlets. I'm sure you've got an outlet, like you work out, right? I know I work out, like I do things. I have, physical outlets of my stress and frustration I can take out on other things. He didn't have that. So he took it out on me and my brother. And usually it was me because I'm the older one. So by using breath work, I was able to go back into that moment and be able to kind of understand his situation and not make it so much about me, but make it more about him and forgive him for that. But also thank him because I know how to tie a tie. I can tie one of the best ties. And I still remember this in chiropractic school when we had our internship, very few people knew how to tie a tie. So they would come to me and I would tie their ties for them, right? So it's a way of kind of paying it forward. But I also learned that I could do a lot of things myself. And it really empowered me. That moment really empowered me because it was like, man, I don't want to be like this and ask other people for help and be at the mercy of somebody else. I want to be almost like a Renaissance man and be good at a lot of different things. And so, it has propelled me in many ways. There's so many things that I could do. My wife is like, how do you know how to do that? How do you know how to do that? And I'm just curious. I learn, I observe, I watch. That's how I learned how to cut hair. I would just watch the barber. Instead of reading magazines, I would sit there and watch what they were doing. And I would learn from different techniques. I would look at the equipment. I would buy the equipment. And so I was an avid observer. So, plant medicine can get you there into that story and help you rewrite it, but so can breath work. It can be a very powerful tool. Now, what's cool about breath work is that it's 100% legal, no matter where you go, right? So we don't have to worry about that. We can also do it on Zoom, right? The experiences that we've had together were done virtually, so you could be in the comfort of your home versus having to be in a strange new place that you've never been to, right? If you go to a ceremony or if you're doing breath work for the first time in a physical location, that's not your home court, right? You could be in your home court doing this methodology and there's no side effects of it either. It's really a pure healing experience that people go through. And we do open up some cans of worms, but oftentimes you're, if not always, presented with the answer. An elegant solution oftentimes is presented as well.
Yeah, I love that. And you had my mind kind of spin off in a direction when you started to mention about the experience with your father. And I recently listened to your last podcast with Dave Asprey, and he mentioned about an experience that he had with bullying. And he said that many entrepreneurs experience bullying. And it's kind of interesting to think about that because, obviously my platform, Entrepreneurs in Recovery, it's like I would think, bullying is a big one that maybe I didn't even know was a hidden epidemic of entrepreneurs bullying. And so I'm wondering, have you ever experienced any bullying and what maybe that role has played in your life and how you kind of came through that? Has that ever happened to you?
Yeah, great question. So I can't say that I was ever bullied, but here's why. It's because I always played off into the corner and never really got involved in many situations. So, and here's why. So when I was growing up, I actually had a black nevus on my nose. So it was about like maybe a quarter of an inch and a circular birthmark, a black one right on my nose here. So I was always very self-conscious. So if you ever meet me in person, you'll see, well, you have, but you'll see there's a scar on my nose because I had that removed probably like 15 years ago now. Well, closer to 20 years, sorry. So growing up, I was very shy. I was very timid. I was very self-conscious, especially when I met new people, because the people that I knew, my friends that I had, they knew I was a great guy. They knew I was a nice, kind human being. But when you meet someone for the first time, you just never know what they're going to think, right? So for me, I was very self-conscious growing up because of that. And it wasn't until my seventh trimester, sorry, in chiropractic school that I actually had it removed. So I lived with that nevus my whole life, my whole, adolescent and into early adult life. So I feel like that, you would think that you get bullied for something like that, but I never did because I just learned how to stay out of those type of situations where I would be bullied, right? I'd kind of, walk the other way or shy in a different direction so that I wouldn't even expose myself to that possibility.
Wow, that's really interesting. It's a whole nother viewpoint of kind of like avoiding that as a protection mechanism too for pain. And yeah, that's a really interesting way to look at it. I think, I think about for myself too, avoiding those situations and avoiding fights. Specifically, I was always afraid of fighting and, and getting in fights, and I was always the peacemaker, and I'd watch fights, growing up in the city, and but always avoiding the fights. And yeah, so it's just a really interesting way to think about the other side of the coin, which is, hey, I'm going to avoid this so I don't have to have this. And there is something though that came up when you were talking about, it sounds like, and this is, I'm sure for many entrepreneurs, is the journey of struggling to ask for help, because it sounds like you've had to really do things on your own quite a bit throughout your journey. So what has it been like for you as an entrepreneur to ask for help? Has that been difficult?
Yeah, what a great insight. Absolutely. It's been probably my biggest challenge and struggle is asking for help, because I feel like I have to have it all together. And, I've gotten better at it, but it's something I have to work at. Because a lot of times, especially as your business grows, you want to hand something off to somebody. But I remember something my dad told me one day, and this is what spawned me to start cutting hair, because I would complain about the haircut. He's like, well, sometimes you have to do it yourself. And so then I'm like, how am I going to learn how to cut my own hair, right? How's that going to work? So I started practicing on my brother, and then I was able to do it on myself. And then I could use like multiple mirrors and give myself the perfect haircut. So with that understanding, sometimes you have to do things yourself, is how I approach the world. Because if I wanted something done, and I have very particular taste, I'm very specific, and I tell all my vendors this. I say, listen, I'm very anal about certain things. I like things a certain way. I will always pay you on time, and you'll probably do the best work you've ever done, but you just have to be prepared that that's how it's going to be. And so, yeah, I can definitely say it's been a challenge for me to ask for help, because when you grow up with immigrant parents, they kind of expect you to know everything. They expect you to know how a computer works. They expect you to know how to repair a television when it's not working, or a VCR. My parents, it's funny because we'd go to a restaurant. My mom would be like, oh, I could make this at home. I'm like, yeah, of course you can. It's food. Like, of course you can make it at home. She's so focused on the mechanics of making the food instead of enjoying the food that we're eating as a family in a nice restaurant, So you grew up with a lot of chatter like that in an immigrant family, because every penny counts, right? Every dollar counts. And we were nowhere close to being broke, so I don't want to paint that picture. But every penny counted regardless, because my parents came here with nothing, right? So you have that record playing in your head that you've got to be able to do everything. And I believe that served me in many ways, because I've been able to do a lot of things over the course of my business. I could run every aspect of my business because I've had to at some point, right? Now I delegate those tasks to somebody else. Another example I can give you is my pool. So I'm switching over from pool service companies, and in the interim, the pool chemistry wasn't balanced, and now I'm a pool chemist, right? So the last couple of days I've been balancing the chemistry of my pool. I love learning new things. After this call, I've got to repair my power washer. So, I watch YouTube videos, I learn how to fix things, and I enjoy doing it. And, so it allows me to develop a different set of skills, but a lot of that comes from not wanting to ask for help or having to pay to ask for help because of some of the chatter that was happening as adults. And we got a lot of praise, right? So we got a lot of praise when we were able to fix something. My mom still tells me to this day, she's like, I'm so proud of how you do all these things. So for me to, the inner child in me to receive more love from my mom, right? I would receive less love if I said, hey, look, I hired someone to do this for me. Do you love it? Right? I would receive no love because she'd be like, you could do this.
Yeah.
Right? That would be her, that would always be her response. And she'd be right. But now, sometimes you don't have time to do these things anymore. There's more important things to do.
Yeah, I can relate so much. I mean, the asking for help, it's like the foundation in many ways of addiction and mental health. But for me, I had a hard time, just like you, especially as an entrepreneur, asking for help because of the same thing, getting all these certifications and plaques and all this stuff. But it's at the end of the day, it's just, why don't you just ask for help? Even like getting picked up at the airport, I just never ask. I travel and I'm always, parking there because I know the way it works. I know I'm very efficient, and I'm really picking that up, that we have that in common with each other. And I think that's in itself could be its own little epidemic, is not asking for help as a listener or even as an entrepreneur. Like, how in what ways can we maybe both work on asking for more help? And I've really learned that lesson hard this year with some of my healing journeys I've been on, and having to ask for help, like literally, like felt like life and death if I didn't ask for help, and had to learn it the hard way. It seems like sometimes we have to learn it the hard way.
Yeah, and one of the challenges has always been for me being the oldest grandson, right? Everyone kind of looks up to me, if you will. And I'm about like 10 to 12 years older than my next set of cousins. So there's a big age gap. And so there's always a lot of pressure for us to perform, right? For us to get it right, or for us to do things correctly. In fact, I still remember, this was quite traumatizing for me, but in a weird way, at age 17, I became an H&R Block certified tax preparer. So every Saturday morning for a few months, I'd go to tax school. Could you imagine this as a 17-year-old? Because my parents were, they took the H&R Block course, so they would fill out taxes for people as kind of a little side gig for them, as additional source of income for them. It's like, oh, this is so easy, Sachin, you should do it. I'm like, I don't want to be a tax preparer. Why should I do this? She's like, oh, so you don't have to pay anyone in the future to do it for you. And I'm like, okay, I wasn't, like, why don't I just have you guys do it? They're like, no, you should know this for yourself. So, begrudgingly every Saturday morning, instead of watching cartoons or hanging out with my friends or playing sports, I would be at an H&R Block, tax course, learning how to prepare taxes. I never prepared a single tax form in my life. In fact, I hate taxes, and I hate all the preparation and paperwork that goes along with it, probably because of that trauma that I experienced of being forced to do something like that. And everyone in that class was like way older than me, like usually my parents' age or in their mid 40s. And here I am, the 17-year-old. And I'm like, who's going to hire me to do their taxes? Like, it was just so comical when I think about it and look back at it.
Wow. Well, if you don't mind, I need some tax help. I'm just kidding. I'm in the same boat with taxes. But it's really exciting to hear all these things about you. Like, never would have pictured you working at H&R Block. So I kind of want to shift gears a little bit to something about something you mentioned about lifestyle medicine. But before I do that, there was a quote in your book, because I love books, and I dove in a little bit, and you have a quote in your book that says, screen your patients to produce a better outcome instead of screening them to make a higher income. And I was hoping you could kind of elaborate on that as we transition to this idea of lifestyle medicine, but really start with that quote.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that too. So one of the things that we encourage our practitioners to do is really focus on who they're working with, because in a participatory system of wellness, where the client produces 80% of the results, you have to know that they are well informed and well prepared, that this is their task, right? You're going to coach them and you're going to guide them, but they're going to do all the heavy lifting. Kind of like a basketball team, right? When you hire a coach, you're doing all the work. The coach is blowing the whistle. They're telling you how much to run, when to run, but the player themselves is doing all the work. And so it's going to be like that versus the relationship that somebody might have with a surgeon, right? Where you're completely unconscious. Like, we need you to move no part of your body. We just need you barely breathing. We need you barely alive so we can do this procedure. So it's kind of the exact opposite, outcome, or the exact opposite kind of ratio that we're looking at, right? A surgeon is kind of responsible for the majority, let's say 80% of the outcome. Client is responsible for 20, right? How they prepared for the surgery and how they took care of themselves afterwards. In functional medicine, it's the opposite, where the client is responsible for 80% of the outcome because they're going to do the work. They're going to eat the food or not eat the foods that are problematic for them. They're going to do the exercise. They're going to wake up and go to bed at a certain time. They're going to track their progress. They're going to report into you. They're going to be responsible for 80% of the outcome. And so just because somebody has the money to pay, it doesn't necessarily make them a good candidate for your services, because they're going to be the ones that have to produce the outcome. You're going to be guiding them, coaching them, mentoring them, answering questions as they come up, but it's really on them to create the outcome.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. Participatory process of health and wellness. I mean, I just love that. I mean, my own journey, I obviously had to take ownership of my own health and wellness, and a lot of the environments that I was in, they weren't eating the greatest foods or drinking the greatest beverages. And it's no judgment to that, but that would have really done a number on my adrenals and my mental health. And so, at some point I had to take a hard look at that and start reading food labels and getting really into what this idea of holistic health is and ownership of my own health journey, because I could be in recovery for 15, 20 years, but I'm still extremely tired, extremely run down, and have a lot of these dis-ease that is really caused by what I'm putting into my mouth. And so when we talk about like lifestyle medicine, can you jump into that a little bit more? I'm kind of curious. And functional medicine, I love that. That was a concept really when I started to become friends with you that I really started to dive into, because you brilliantly laid it out with the Living Proof Institute and all the information you have available. But I'd love to hear more about lifestyle medicine, and also maybe what's your greatest sources of energy for yourself right now? What are things that are bringing the greatest energy into your world at this current time?
Yeah, sure. So lifestyle medicine is really just that, right? It's how we live our life. It is basically something that we carry with us, and either consciously or unconsciously, 24/7 through our lives. So think of your life from the moment you wake up, right? There's so many things that we need to take care of for the day. The first thing we need to take care of is ourselves. So with lifestyle medicine, we're always checking in. We're checking in into any and every situation that we're in to ensure that we're best prepared to match our environment, to match the requirements of our body and our environment, if you will. So lifestyle medicine would look something like this, right? For someone like me, I wake up in the morning, I check in with my breath. I check in on my Oura ring to see how well I slept, how well I recovered from the previous day. Then what I do is I try to get morning sunlight within the first hour of the day. I try to get outside, even if it's raining. There's plenty of brightness to go around. Especially on a sunny day, you want to make sure you're definitely outside within the first hour, because that's going to set my circadian clock. Throughout the day, as I'm breathing, I'm checking in on my breath probably several hundred times a day to ask myself, am I breathing through my nose or my mouth? Am I breathing at a certain pace? A cadence of 6 seconds in, 6 seconds out is called coherence breathing. Am I breathing at that pace to keep my nervous system in a relaxed state? Lifestyle medicine could include things like staying hydrated. So within the first hour, I usually have about 1 liter of fluid, and that keeps my body nice and hydrated. I add some electrolytes, like, squeeze a lemon, or add some, electrolyte supplementation to my water. So having that awareness with each thing that I do from a lifestyle perspective makes all the difference. And I could list like 100 little things that I do, and I probably take them for granted now, but they're all based on lifestyle. When I'm sitting, how's my posture, right? When I'm laying, am I laying in the right position? when I'm outside, right? Am I maximizing the ability to ground with the earth, right? Are my feet barefoot in the grass for a certain amount of the day? I have a grounding mat on my desk, right? So passively, I'm exchanging electrons with the earth without having to think about it. How about lighting, right? Is my lighting appropriate for, for me to feel energized, right? And different frequencies of light are required at different times of the day. So you'll notice that the sun as it's setting is more of an orange and reddish color. So we turn on different colored light bulbs in the evening to help us set the right circadian rhythm. So our body gets the message that, hey, it's time to start winding down. It's time to go to bed soon. And so we're sending our body the right message. So our environment, our lifestyle choices, all of those things make a huge difference. And I haven't even talked about supplementation, because most people jump right to supplements when they want to sleep better instead of lifestyle, which is actually the real way that we sleep better, right? Getting morning sunlight, making sure that we're getting the ability or have the ability to watch the sunset at night, right? Avoiding overhead lighting at night, not eating too late, right? Proper breathing and proper positioning while you sleep. All of those things make a big difference, but those are all lifestyle factors that we can change. Another example is when we eat. So most people, when they eat, and this is to their own admission, at least the clients that we work with, is the first question I ask them is, do they chew their food? And most people jokingly say, no, I inhale it. They're almost proud of inhaling their food. And they're probably proud because their parents rushed them when they were kids to eat properly. So they got validation when they finished their meal quickly. I was notorious for eating really slow. So I always got in trouble if I took too long to eat. Now, if you ever have a meal with me, you'll probably notice I'm the last person to finish my meal, because slowing down and chewing our food is one of the most important things that we can do to our food. It's not just what we eat, but how we eat and the state in which we eat that makes a difference. So if you and I hypothetically had the exact same meal, and let's just assume everything else is equal, we're genetic and microbiome clones of each other, so we have the same chemistry in our body. If you were to eat that meal standing up, stressed out, barely chewing it, and run right back into work, and I was to sit down, do some gentle breathing, calm down, look at my food, smell my food, take a bite out of my food, chew it as much as I possibly can, slow my whole system down so I could digest it, and then, find my way back into work and ease myself in, who's going to digest that food better, right? I mean, it's so blatantly obvious, but in our traditional kind of reductionistic method of looking at nutrition, we just look at the food label, right? We just look at how many calories there are, or how much fat or protein or micronutrients there are. And most people don't know this, but there's about a 20% plus or minus in the accuracy of a food label. So most food labels we read, are completely wrong in some instances, right? Like it might not be exactly what we think it is, right? So chewing our food, slowing down, getting parasympathetic, having gratitude for it, those are the type of things that we would teach a lifestyle client. And we would teach that really to all of our clients. All of our clients are lifestyle clients. However, many times this person will have come to us changing their diet 7 or 8 times, changing their supplement protocol several times, right? Taking this enzyme or that enzyme. And I'm like, dude, your body makes these enzymes, right? But it doesn't make them when you're eating stressed out. It makes them when you trigger a specific sequence of events that start by chewing your food. Right? So something as simple as chewing your food makes such a profound difference, but people don't realize this. And then when they do, they start to notice an immediate improvement, right? It doesn't take months for these systems to come back online. They've been waiting for you to, send this messaging signal to them this entire time. So this is how we can help people heal so dramatically well, and really not heal. They were never broken to begin with. They just weren't using the features that their body came with. It's kind of like, imagine you buy an iPhone and all you use it for is the phone. And you had no idea that you could download apps. You had no idea that you could use it as a calculator, as a camera, as a video camera, as a messaging device. But all you knew is that it was a phone. And when it couldn't do all those other things, right, you thought you had to hire someone to do them for you, right? Or take a pill to do them for you. But if you just sent your body the right message through the environment, through lifestyle choices, your body is self-regulating.
Yeah, and I love all this is directly correlated to the world I've spent almost 20 years in, which is the world of addiction recovery, mental health, trauma. I mean, this is I mean, all this information today has been, I mean, this is the stuff that has really pulled me out of the depths, even with, abstinence and all these choices that I made early on. Really, I was still in my depression and anxiety in many ways, and they were masked by not taking priority with lifestyle medicine and self-care, and really starting to slow down and doing things that you were mentioning. And one of the things I want to mention, I saw this in a recent post of yours, and I couldn't resist. You talk about thumb sucking. So just a little backstory for me. I was a chronic thumb sucker. In fact, I call myself a functioning thumb sucker, because I was thumb sucking from age, in the womb to age almost 10 years old. And I took a brutal beating for that, as far as emotionally, and being made fun of. But it was obviously a coping mechanism. And I'm just curious if you could tell us a little bit about what you found and discovered when you researched thumb sucking, just because I know there's some audience members that are definitely, we're chronic thumb suckers, because when I became clean about that, many people reach out to me. So anything you can comment on about thumb sucking and maybe what we should be thinking of?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will say that I am by no means an expert on this topic. And if you see a myofunctional therapist, if somebody is struggling with this, then they can help you quite a bit. From a functional medicine and kind of lifestyle medicine perspective, and from a body kind of anatomical perspective, one of the things that happens, and it's very common and very overlooked, is that children will be born with a tongue tie. And a tongue tie is basically when the frenulum, right there, if you're listening to audio, it's the little stringy thing underneath your tongue. If you lift your tongue, you'll see this vertical line. It's a frenulum. And for some people, that frenulum can be very prominent, which can make it very difficult for them to put their tongue at the roof of their mouth. Now, what happens with children is they're always looking for ways to pacify themselves and soothe themselves and to feel comfortable. So when somebody has a normal, kind of tongue anatomy, if you will, their tongue can sit, when their mouth is closed, their tongue sits at the roof of their mouth, which closes this energy mudra, which actually makes us feel calm and relaxed. However, if somebody is a mouth breather or they have a tongue tie, then their tongue doesn't reach the roof of their mouth. It doesn't predominantly sit in that position. And, when you put your tongue at the roof of your mouth, if you open your mouth, you can't breathe through your mouth. It actually literally seals your ability to do that. So most people who are mouth breathers, which is about 50% of the population, not only are they breathing more shallow, not only are they getting less oxygen into their lungs, but they're also more likely to be in a stress or low grade anxiety or low stress state because their tongue isn't hitting the roof of their mouth. So what children will do, as brilliant as they are, they find a way, right? Life always finds a way, as they say, is they will put their thumb in their mouth or their fingers in their mouth or a pacifier in their mouth, which essentially acts as a spacer between the roof of their mouth and their tongue. So their tongue now is touching the roof of their mouth, hitting that point that creates the instant soothing effect that they're experiencing. So as adults, some people might turn to lollipops or a sucker, because that again fills in that gap and creates that compression for them. Some people might chew gum because that creates that fills in the gap and creates that compression for them. Some people might need to eat frequently because of that, and that's why eating can be very soothing for people because of that meridian point that's being addressed. So the problem with people who suck their thumbs is that it changes the facial structure. So your thumb, as you'll notice, is not wide. It's not shaped quite like your tongue is. And there's my thumb there. And so what happens is with the sucking action, they push their hard palate up into their nasal cavity, creating a much more narrow breathing airway. And what that can potentially result in is making it easier for them to breathe through their mouth, because when they breathe through their nose, it's going to feel more restricted. It can also change the dental structure of the face depending on how significant the challenge is for that person. So their teeth they'll have an overbite with their teeth, and their teeth may need braces and other instruments like that. And it can lead to more sinus infections. It can lead to mouth breathing, and mouth breathing has a whole set of consequences, such as increase in cavities. So mouth breathing is the number one cause of cavities. Unbeknownst to most people who think it's sugar, it's actually mouth breathing. Mouth breathing changes the saliva in our mouth, and our saliva acts as a protective mechanism. When our saliva gets dry, which happens in mouth breathers, then the concentration of bacteria that eats away at our enamel starts to increase, and that results in cavities for people. Mouth breathing also is catastrophic to our health because it decreases the production of nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a molecule that instantly kills viruses and bacteria. Nitric oxide dilates our blood vessels and increases microcirculation. So it has a whole host of many benefits, and those can be compromised when we are mouth breathers. So, lots to say about that, but I hope that gives people some insights into what they can do. If your child sucks their thumb, look under their tongue, because they may not be able to hit the roof of their mouth. And my wife, she's talked about this publicly, so I'll share. So she used to be a thumb sucker, and pretty bad one, actually, from what she's telling me. Now she's spilling all the beans now because she's going through a procedure, and now she's interviewing her mom a little bit more to find out more about her childhood. And she would suck her thumb all the time, and she couldn't go anywhere without her little handkerchief that she would put in her mouth, and she would suck on that and or her thumb. And so what that's resulted in with her is, unless she's conscious about it now, which she is for the last few years, she's naturally a mouth breather. Her front teeth are actually, she has a malocclusion, so she has an open bite. So her front two teeth don't touch each other, and she's had braces twice. So it's not like she hasn't had plenty of dental work done, but it's because she has a high arching palate. So now she's having dental work done that spreads her palate out a little bit, allows room for those teeth to come in, optimally. If you look at her, she's got a beautiful smile, but if you look at her smile from a technical perspective, then she's got an open bite. So what that means for her is, like, if she tries to bite into a piece of lettuce, she can't break it with her front teeth. So her front two teeth don't overlap with one another. And so now she's having work done to correct that. She tapes her mouth closed at night. She's a conscious mouth breather during the day. She's got the Invisalign product now that she's using to create that adjustment in her jaw. And so those are some of the adult consequences of not getting these things addressed, right? And thankfully, we know this, so we're able to work with her and fix it. But, if she was married to an accountant, let's say, it may not be part of the conversation.
Yeah, you definitely got me thinking, because my two teeth definitely don't touch. I have a huge overbite from 10 years of thumb sucking today. So maybe we'll have to go a little deeper in this conversation in another call.
Yeah. Do you know if you have a tongue tie?
What exactly is that?
So try to put your tongue at the roof of your mouth,
mm-hmm.
and then suck your tongue back.
Mm-hmm.
So see, yeah, it seems like you've got a tongue tie.
I knew it. I knew there was something going on.
So you can actually have that laser surgeried. The procedure itself for most people is a painless procedure. And here's what's really interesting about tongue ties. So if you look at your fascia, and please, if it's way too off topic, let me know. But if you look at your fascia is basically like this spandex suit that wraps around your entire body. And the top part of your fascia is actually under your tongue. So for many people, when they have a tongue tie, it affects their posture. They a lot of times will have chronic neck pain or shoulder pain, upper back pain. It can affect their their lumbar posture. It can affect their hips. It can affect, the fascia goes all the way from the bottom of your tongue all the way to the tip of your toes. So when people have tight fascia, because of that tongue tie, their fascia may be bound up and tight everywhere else. And so there's been a lot of case studies where people will go in, they'll get that fascia stripped out, or they'll get the fascia cut. They'll get the tongue tie cut, not the fascia. They'll get the tongue tie cut, which is part of that fascia, and their body instantly melts into the chair. So not sure if you experience any of those.
This is blowing my mind. I think this podcast today is all about me, and I'm going to definitely investigate this, because I definitely have issues with posture. I always have.
Okay.
I definitely have pain in my shoulders at times, really. And I'm a really, really healthy person, really healthy, conscious. but yeah, I always questioned certain things about my posture and what is the root cause. And man, if it was from my thumb sucking, oh man, I'm going to have to get that laser surgery soon.
Yeah, and the thumb sucking, if it is the case that you have a tongue tie, would have been from the tongue tie. So
Gotcha.
the thumb sucking would have been an adaptation for you to feel good, right? So it's not the thumb sucking that's the problem. That's how you would feel good, right? And who doesn't want to feel good, right?
Of course.
People who didn't have a tongue tie, they had their tongue to put at the roof of their mouth. Whereas people who don't have that capability, they've got to find something else to do that for them. And what's easier than your thumb? It's always there. It's not going anywhere. But yeah, it could very well be that. So I would, once we jump off, I'll send you some additional information. And I know people that, can help you in identifying if that is the case. And then usually when you have the procedure done, you do exercises first leading up to the procedure. The procedure just takes a few seconds, and then you have exercises afterwards. You don't want the tie to grow back. Sometimes that can happen if you don't do the exercises. So it's not just a matter of snipping it, it's a matter of also doing the exercises that go along with it.
I'd like to ask, when I was thumb sucking, obviously it was a coping mechanism for the pain going on in the household and in my own world, and having to cope with that, thumb sucking, including that now I know about the information you just shared as well. I'm just curious, when you tune back into you as a child, I know you're a father, what advice would you have for that younger version of yourself with holistic health and all you know at this stage?
Oh, having a 12-year-old, I'm so grateful to have this knowledge and this awareness. I'll give you an example of how this has played out, how this awareness has played out in my life. So when my sons first started going to the dentist, my son Devin started going to the dentist for the first time, the dentist is like, "We've got some bad news." We're like, "What do you mean? Like, what's going on here?" And they're like, "Yeah, he's got tons of cavities." And we're like, "Cavities? Like, this guy doesn't eat sugar. He doesn't do any of these things." And so as I went down the rabbit hole, I started realizing that he was a mouth breather. So as cute as it is, many children are mouth breathers because they don't have the self-discipline or the awareness that they're breathing through their mouth. It's easy to breathe through their mouth. So guess what they do? So he would drool all the time, and we thought it was so cute and gross at the same time. And it turns out it's because he was breathing through his mouth. That's why he was actually drooling all the time. And so we go to the dentist. The dentist is like, "Yeah, he's got all these cavities, but good news is that these teeth are all going to fall out, so it's not a big deal." But not a big deal to them, but a big deal to us, because we were like scratching our heads. Why is this happening? And then I read James Nestor's book, Breath, and that really gave me a whole new perspective on facial anatomy and breathing and how the two are very closely connected. And in that book, what James talks about is that, if you think about it, I don't know if you had your wisdom teeth pulled, but I had my wisdom teeth pulled. And when I had my wisdom teeth pulled, I'm like, this is kind of strange. Like, what did they do before dentists? Like, what would happen if people didn't have a dentist and their wisdom teeth grew? And it turns out that our jaws were much bigger. Just several centuries ago, our jaws were much bigger than they are now. And it's because we're eating very soft food and processed food and, food that's not loaded with micronutrients as it used to be. We're actually creating smaller and smaller jaws, which creates smaller and smaller airways. And so now children are having multiple teeth pulled, not just their wisdom teeth, but they're having multiple teeth pulled, and then they're getting braces installed, but that doesn't actually fix the problem. It actually makes the problem worse. So when I went to the dentist, the orthodontist, he's like, "Yeah, we're going to have to pull these teeth. There's nothing we can do about it." I'm like, "Okay, we're going to go somewhere else. We're going to get a different opinion." And we did. And we found a more holistic dentist who's not just concerned about teeth, but also concerned about facial structure, because your facial structure affects so many different areas of your health, right? Not just how you look. I mean, you're far more attractive when you have the right facial structure and a nice wide jaw versus a thin, narrow jaw, right? So there's obviously that. And so what we did with our son is we had a palatal expander installed to push his palate out and to push and to actually make his jaw a little bit bigger. And so he's going through that process at the moment, but the old me wouldn't have known any of this. And we would have just pulled the teeth, put on braces just like everyone else. And guess what? He'd have a narrow airway and he'd be a mouth breather. So we have been taping him for the last 4 years. So he tapes his mouth closed every night. pretty much without fail, unless he's traveling, and then it becomes something that he forgets. But he tapes his mouth every night. He plays basketball. He's a rock star in basketball, and we've taught him breathing techniques so he can outgas and outpace his friends. And our code is this. So if I catch him breathing through his mouth, I just tap on my nose, and he knows to start breathing through his nose. He hasn't had any teeth pulled, which we're really proud of. And yeah, so having this awareness has really spilled into my life, and I'm able to pour into him and create this little superhuman, if you will, little Renaissance boy. He's like good at so many things because we feed him well. We explore different parts of who he is. When I was growing up, it was all about math and science and chemistry and biology. It was all the STEM, curriculum. And now with my son, he's a beautiful artist. So, we love celebrating his artistic work. And so, going back, like if I could tell my younger self what to emphasize more, it would be to play more, to have more fun, maybe not take things and life so seriously. Experiment, right? Be curious and take really good care of your health, and never trust the first opinion, right? You can go somewhere else and validate the opinion. We actually went for his teeth, went to 4 different orthodontists, and they all wanted to pull his teeth. So, thankfully we had the fortitude and the awareness and the knowledge, because if it was my parents, first of all, we wouldn't have had the braces, but if it was my parents, then they would have pulled the teeth, because they wouldn't have known any better. They would have just trusted who they thought the authority figure was. But when it comes to your health, we're the authority figure. It doesn't have to be the way somebody else says it is, within reason, of course. So yeah, there's that. I hope that's helpful for people.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for sharing that. Really appreciate it. This is going to be a podcast people are going to listen to a few times. A lot of gems.
Lots to unpack. We went in many different directions, but I think there's something here for everyone.
Yeah, and as we come to a close, I'm deciding on, is this going to be a question I ask to my guests at the end as I get started with this show. But when you think about, well, first of all, with the work you're doing, which is like really impressive, and with the Living Proof Institute, and you've coached even mutual friends of mine and Steve and different people, and I know the results that they've had. And then, I read about Living Proof Institute. This is a quote: "The Living Proof Institute has been regarded as one of the most innovative functional medicine practices in the world." And I think about that type of work you're doing. So with that said, what vision or highest intentions are you bringing to reality right now? What do you look forward to manifesting in your world right now?
Oh, great question. So going back to something I said earlier, the world that I want to bring into fruition, I think, is the world that you want to bring into fruition, where people are healthy, happy, and whole for their entire lifetime. Imagine, right now, the way things are set up is the majority of our clients are in their 40s and 50s. Okay, so they're recognizing that, things break down over time, that maybe their choices are starting to catch up with them, and they're also recognizing that they don't have a disease that they want to manage, or a dysfunction they want to manage with drugs. Because guess what? If you gave a healthy person drugs, you'd give them a disease. So how can we give an unhealthy person a drug and expect them to be healthy, right? It's biologically impossible. If 2 people had the same blood pressure and one of them was on a medication, whose life insurance policy do you think would be higher? Right? The person on the medication, right? So the science and the math speaks for itself, right? So an actuarial scientist studies this his entire life, or her entire life, to understand the mathematical consequences of taking drugs and medications. And so our ideal client right now is somebody who's at that age, but our real ideal client is their children. Because if we could teach them a lifestyle-driven program, what happens is they walk into the home, instead of with a garbage bag full of supplements or a garbage bag full of drugs, they walk into a home with a whole new look on life, with a whole new belief system, with a whole new paradigm. Because let's just say, hypothetically, a mom comes to us and we send her home with a garbage bag full of supplements for choices that she's making, right? Instead of, for decisions that she's making on a daily basis are leading to her needing these supplements or needing these medications. What if we could change those choices? because the message that we send home with that parent is that you don't need to change anything, just take these pills. And that's not the message I want to send home with the parent. I want to empower parents. I want to empower individuals. They don't have to be parents either, but I want to empower individuals to reclaim their power. And I want them to model that to the next generation. You know, our kids don't listen. They listen to some of the things we say, but they do 100% of the things that we do. So they're always watching. They're always paying attention. They're always, you know, my son is always looking over at me when he's at the snack table, or he's looking at when I'm at the snack table, what's going into my plate, because it's not what I say, but it's what I do that matters the most. And so when we send a parent home, or when we send an adult home, or anyone home, we want to make sure that we're sending them home with the right message, that they can heal if they make the right changes, give their body the right input. Then guess what? The coordinated function of their trillions upon trillions of cells has been waiting for that their entire life, for that moment, for them to decide that I'm going to be healthy and I'm going to take care of you. You know, this idea that we have in conventional medicine that we're fighting mental health, we're fighting cancer, we're fighting diabetes. Who the hell are you fighting? Right? What exactly are we fighting when we say we're fighting diabetes? Right? Your body didn't create diabetes. Or your body has diabetes, but it didn't create the diabetes. It's an intelligent adaptation to unintelligent environments and behaviors and inputs, some of them known, some of them unknown. And so the obvious things people can change, but the less obvious things we can help them with changing.
Just sit with that one. That was beautiful. Thank you so much for that, Sachin. I think at this point, I'd love to give my audience, how can they work with you? I know you have a couple different things going on, and you know, I'd love to ask you how people can work with you, and then also if there's any types of resources or gifts that some of my listeners, you know, they're not going to be able to access some of these things that we're privileged to access, and maybe there's a gift that you can give away as well. So one, how can people reach you and learn more about what you're doing in the world, and also, is there any type of gift or giveaway you can give to my audience?
Yeah, well, thank you, Jesse, for this opportunity, and thank you for asking. So a couple of the ways that they could work with somebody from our organization is by going to www.becomeproof.com, and that's our homepage, or they can go to mymetabolicreset.ca. That's kind of our flagship program that we take people through, where we teach them how to reset their lifestyle. And in doing so, we radically reduce inflammation. People start losing stubborn weight. They start sleeping better. They start having more energy. Their hot flashes go away if they have hot flashes. Their hormones become balanced. So it's really teaching them how to live a healthy, holistic lifestyle from as many different vantage points as possible. We focus on breath. We focus on, you know, all the things that are necessary for us to experience amazing health. So mymetabolicreset.ca, they can learn more about that program. We also, you know, we combine, you know, ancient wisdom, common sense, and wearable technology. So we actually give our clients, if they're in certain programs, we give them an Aura ring to track their progress. So we're sticklers for results. We want to make sure that everyone that we work with is committed to the process and they get amazing results in working with us. There's a free gift I'd love to offer everyone as well, where they can learn more about what we do. We've got a morning routine, and this morning routine is optimized for metabolic health and energy. So if you go to morningroutine.ca, then it'll take you to that link, and there's an amazing download and resources that we share with you as a result of that for free.
Well, it's been an incredible honor for me to interview you finally. I've been thinking about this for many years, and this was just a wealth of information that I'm even going to come back to and listen to again. And I hope all of our listeners do as well. So Sachin, thank you so much for today and coming on the show. It's been a real pleasure for me. Thank you.
Jesse, it's an absolute honor, and I'm so grateful for this opportunity to spend time with you, to share, you know, some of the things I've never shared with anyone before, and to also explore my own childhood. So thank you for that. Thank you for holding space.
Absolutely. And we'll be sharing all this in the show notes too. So don't worry, you don't have to write down everything that was said today. We'll provide in the show notes. So thanks again, everyone.